Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about preparedness and why it's about not living in fear, contrary to what some naysayers try to claim. Now, I will admit that for a lot of people, when they start getting on the preparedness bandwagon, sometimes it is fear that motivates them in the first place. But once you start putting up food and putting up fuel and finding alternative ways to get water or putting up water, or having alternative light sources, cook sources, heat sources, and more, what you're actually doing is giving yourself more peace of mind so you are not living in fear. I know for some people who have been watching my channel for years might think this just sounds redundant, but I always keep trying to find new ways to approach this subject so that people will learn it's actually the opposite. Now, what motivates you to buy health insurance or house insurance? What motivates you to do this? Other than being required to or forced to, why do people do it? It's out of fear of what may happen. So those who want to say, well, I'm not living in fear, but they're shelling out big bucks every month for insurance that they probably will never use, why are they doing it? They're doing it because fear motivates them to do so, and because they want to be covered in the case of anything that happens. But I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. First thing I want to talk about is let's just talk about some of the day-to-day, everyday reasons why it's good to prepare, and it has nothing to do with preparing for the end of the world. The two of us in our household, my main focus when it comes to preparing is food. That's my category there, where Patrick takes care of the things like tools and fuel and more. And then collectively, we always are looking at other cook sources, light sources, and heat sources. So let's talk about these everyday reasons. For me, when I first started doing food storage in particular, it was all about convenience and saving money, because I found that at the time we had a local co-op that would order from Glory Bee, which is very similar to Azure Standard. There were several people in the town that we'd get together and do big purchase, and then we didn't have to pay any shipping to have them truck it up here for us. So that was really great. But as such, you were buying a lot of stuff in bulk. But I loved that because since my teens, I've been cooking and baking things from scratch. I go through a lot of flour. It was such a great deal to be able to get a 50-pound bag of flour for really, really cheap. I honestly don't remember what I was paying back then. And so I started doing that just to have it on hand. And that meant less visits to the store, or me having to up and run to the store when I realized, oh, I'm in the middle of making something and I just now realized I'm out of this, that, or the other thing. And so I started doing that and finding ways to put it up so it would last during the time that I need it. And then maybe 6 months down the road, they'd do another big order and I'd do that again. I also found that I could save lots of money buying my herbs and spices that way. Because at the time I wasn't even growing herbs like I'm doing now. And so what I could buy a whole pound of an herb for less than what it cost me to buy a single ounce at the local grocery store. And that's why I started stocking up on herbs and spices, because of the amount of money it saved. Before I started growing my own tomatoes and canning them, or even buying tomatoes from the local produce stand when it was open during the season and then canning them up, I was buying the 14 ounce, there were probably 16 ounce cans at one time of the crushed tomatoes, because I used them in so many things. I used them in enchilada sauce. I used them for making any kind of Italian sauce, be it for pizza, ravioli, spaghetti, and so on. I used them to make chili. I used them to make barbecue sauce and more. I'm sure I'm leaving some stuff out. Oh, I also just would throw them into soups and stuff. So I went through a lot of those. And one day I wanted to make something that I needed the crushed tomatoes for and realized I had none, and I really didn't want to run to the store and get some. And I realized, why am I only buying a can at a time when I need it? So the next time they went on sale, I bought a whole bunch, and I never ran out of tomatoes after that, because every time they'd go on sale, I'd buy a whole bunch and restock. That is why I started doing all of this in the first place. It had nothing to do with what was going on in the world. It was about making my life easier and saving money. So when you're building your food storage or other types of things that you cycle through quite a bit, even if it's toothpaste, deodorant, those things I just started making myself out of things I already keep stocked anyway, then man, you don't have to run to the store every single day or even once a week. You just have the things you need. And then you're also ready for anything spontaneous. So I used to be years ago, I would make a meal plan for the week and then plan my shopping for that week around those meals I was going to make. I don't do that anymore. I just say, you know what, this sounds good. I'm going to make this. And I pull the meat out of the freezer or the home canned meat out of the pantry. If it's going to be a meat dish, whatever else I have, and start throwing things together. And that's how I make my meals now. I don't have to do any long in-depth meal planning that then I have to plan all my shopping trips around. I don't have to do that anymore, and I love it. It takes a lot of extra work and stress out of my life. And then as far as storing up other things like excess fabric, materials for making or repairing things, like Patrick, when he finds somebody giving away old bed rails, whether it be at the dump or at a garage sale, he gathers those up, he brings them home, and they get used for making many different things. It is how he made my drying rack, which I actually have 3 or 4 of them now, because I have 2 that I use for soap and 2 that I use next to my wood stove, sometimes on top of the wood stove, and I also use as for when I'm making cookies, and I use it as a cooling rack. He made that out of old bed rails. He once made a lumber rack for his old Toyota pickup using old bed rails and many other things. They have so many uses. So, you know, even if you're not into welding, if you're into sewing or you're into crocheting and you see a big old tub at a garage sale of fabrics and or yarn for sale, buy that up. You just saved a whole bunch of money, and now the yarn's there. When you feel creative and you want to start making something, or you think of something you want to make for someone as a gift, you got the yarn, you got the fabrics, and you can start whipping stuff together. And then the wood, you know, whether it be getting recycled wood, like Patrick used this wood from his equipment trailer when he needed to replace all of the decking, took this stuff, finished it out, and made me this nice, beautiful, long countertop for this room in here, as well as made me various other cabinets, like the cabinet for when we had to replace the sink in this other bathroom over here. He made a whole new cabinet because the sink was much bigger, so we needed a whole new setup. He made that out of the same lumber off that equipment trailer, and he also made me, I don't know if it was out of the same wood, but he also made me a barter cabinet that goes out on just outside our gate. When people are coming up to buy eggs or anything else, I just stick it in there. They either pay me through PayPal or they put the money, the cash in the payment box, and there we go. And so he's always got this stuff on hand. He's always got some kind of lumber that he saves or stocks up on and keeps it on hand whenever there's projects that need to be done. Or he has extra hinges and screws and nails and whatnot for when something needs to simply be repaired. And that stuff is there. And here's another example. He's done several videos on this, but he bought a special tank for our GMC that holds, I think it's 100 gallons of fuel. I think I might be wrong on that, but he keeps that fueled up as well as the regular tank in the truck. And then if he's on the road, he's prepared if he runs out of fuel, especially in the middle of nowhere, or he needs to fill up and he's going through a place that has extremely high fuel prices, even higher than where we are in Washington State, then he can bypass that and just fill up from the tank, his reserve tank. On our other piece of property, we have several tanks full of diesel and regular gasoline for that very purpose. And we keep those things topped off, especially when we see any drop in fuel at all. Top everything off, and then when it goes up, we can work off of that. And then next time it goes down to a lower rate again, which, you know, I'm sure it's going to just keep going up and up and up. But you do still see these little, you know, goes down a little bit, goes up, goes down a little bit, goes up. And so we always try to buy when it's at the lowest point. And of course, all of this also involves having the skills and the knowledge to be able to do these things for yourself. Just think about the Great Depression. People had to learn how to reuse and recycle all kinds of things because there was many things they either simply could not afford or were not available, period. Some people say it'll never happen again. Well, it's clearly happening again, and it's happening right now. But that's one of the more extreme events, and we're talking about the everyday stuff right now. And so one more thing I want to cover before I get into the more serious things is it also means that let's say you're sick, you got a broken leg, or you're just having a very busy, stressful day. You don't want to or have the time to run to the store and get the necessary things. You don't have to do that. You've got everything you need right there. You don't have to leave the house. And if you're even too sick or unable to prepare a meal, well, if you've got meals canned up, like I just have some random things here, but I do have things like home canned chili and home canned soups and home canned meatballs. A lot of this stuff can simply be pulled out and heated up, like the soup and the chili. That's all that needs to be done. One does not have to go through the long process of preparing and cooking all this stuff. It just needs to be heated. And as far as the meatballs, usually what I do is when I'm making biscuits and gravy, I make extra. I put it in a glass bowl with an airtight lid and I freeze it and I let that build up until the bowl is full. And then the next very busy day I grab a jar of the meatballs. They're ready to go. I pull out that gravy. It doesn't take long to thaw. And then just heat everything up together and make a pot of rice. It's a pretty quick meal. And then usually pull out like a jar of carrots or green beans, which I didn't bring any of those in here, or some other vegetable I have canned as a side. And there we go. There's a quick, easy meal. So again, it's about convenience. It's about making things easier and not living in fear because we're already ready to go. So continuing on that theme of not living in fear, let's go ahead and work into a little bit more serious things that can happen and happen to people all the time, all over the world. And that could be a job loss for not doing some required thing to their body that should have never been forced on them in the first place. Or maybe a company needs to downsize, and so they got to lay off some of their workers. Anything can happen that can cause you to lose a job. Or you can get in a bad accident or have a serious illness that causes you to be laid off from work. Having things ready to go, be it food or fuel or water and more, so that if you have to live off those things are a savings account. Very few people have an insurance that covers them when those kind of things happen and they can't work. You might be able to get on unemployment, maybe. And then there's things like storms of various kinds, depending on where you live. We live in a place that doesn't get a lot of snow. What we get a lot of rain. A lot of people that live in Oregon, along the coast of Oregon, think they get a lot of rain. They probably get about the same amount of rain that Seattle gets. We get 2 to 3 times that much rain. We live right next to a rainforest, so go figure. But sometimes the rain can get so heavy things can flood and can wash out roads. We've had that happen. And because we are a small remote town, you can only get into this town from 2 different ways. And if either one or both of those ways gets blocked off, like happened several years ago when we got an unexpected blizzard, I think it was in February or even March, that literally did block off the highway on both sides and made us an island. And what happened was, you got to realize your local grocery store, and I would think this is probably the same for your gas stations and so on, only have enough for 3 days to take care of the community for 3 days. But then what happens is when some event like that happens, whatever kind of storm or even if it's some kind of chemical spill into the water supply, and so people don't have water for a period of time, everybody starts rushing to the store and buys up. Within an hour, everything that you need is going to be gone. If it's water, all the water will be gone. If it's milk and bread and toilet paper and the trucks can't get through, all of those will be gone. And then there's, like here, very, very common power outages. I realize some of you people around the world live in places that you don't get power outages on a regular basis, or maybe you've never even had a power outage. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It can still happen. But around here, it's very common because we live in a place that in the wintertime, we have lots of high winds, and we also have a lot of tall trees because we're in the Pacific Northwest, and so it's very common for us to lose power. But we've lost power for other reasons, such as drunk drivers running into things and causing everybody to lose power to a good part of the town, if not the whole entire town, and many other things. And sometimes it's not even in our own town that it's coming from. It's actually from where we get the main power supply, which is several hours away from us. And so now let's come back to that insurance thing I want to talk about again. I don't understand why people think it's crazy to have food storage or fuel storage or water storage or backup sources for light and heat as a form of insurance, but they are willing to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single month to insurance they may never use. So here's an example that I've given several times. Back in 2019, we had a storm that just came through here. It was a very short storm. Windstorm that just came through and blew off chunks of everybody's roofs, it seemed. Most people, well, unless they had a metal roof, which we have now. And our neighbor, even, she just got her roof put on the summer before, and chunks of it were coming off. That's how bad this storm was. And we had been paying into our homeowner's insurance for 30 years. And we went ahead and held on to the homeowner's insurance after we got out of debt, just in case, because you never know what's going to happen. Well, when that happened and it took off chunks of our roof and they were laying out in the front yard and the backyard and here, there, and everywhere, we called our insurance company. Nothing. They said the most they could do was patch it for us. Well, we didn't need a patch job, nor do we want a patch job, especially when you live in rain country. We needed a new roof and they wouldn't do it for us. And even their patch job, we would have still had to pay a deductible that would have barely covered it, if that. So it was pretty much useless to us. After that, we canceled our house insurance and we haven't looked back. But because we keep emergency funds on hand, thankfully, we were able to replace that whole roof and put on a metal roof on our own and pay cash for it. And we wouldn't have been able to do that had we not been out of debt and been saving money just for such purposes. So that's our insurance. It's the money we save. It's the things like this that we do. And guess what? Especially when it comes to the items that you store, the prices on these things can keep going up. And even if you're one that can grow all these things yourself. Now, we have a garden where we expand on it all the time. So there's a lot of things that, like here, the eggs, the dried eggs. We have our own chickens and I dehydrate up the eggs. I dehydrate up a lot of our zucchini and I've started canning some of it now too. And various other things like pumpkin and tomatoes and beans, green beans and dry beans, and a lot of the herbs that we use. Even these things, you might have a crop failure one year. For whatever reason, your things aren't going to grow. But because you put up extra when you were getting a lot in, you don't have to worry about it the next year. And hopefully the next year will be better. You'll have a better crop. What my point is that these things, there are things that can't be taken away from us unless I store them improperly and they go bad. But as long as you store your food properly, it's always going to be there. Pretty much all your food should have an indefinite shelf life when you store it properly. Unlike house insurance or other kinds of insurance where you either still have to pay a copay or some kind of deductible to be able to get anything out of it, or they're just not going to do anything for you anyway. So all of the years of paying in that money and then you go to use it and it's worthless. Whereas all the years of putting up food, which we cycle through, by the way, that's still there. Unless we have a house fire that takes everything, well, we also have backup plans for that because we don't keep all of our eggs in one basket. So that's another part of being prepared. So we don't have to worry about whether or not our insurance is going to pay or decide to turn us down because we're the ones that control that. I'm not going to tell myself, well, gee, Heidi, because you didn't pay enough into the carrot fund insurance, you can't go back and have that can of carrots that you put back there when your carrot crop failed. Sorry. Those who want to call us crazy and act like it's stupid or just accuse us of always living in fear, you actually have it backwards. And if you're paying insurance on anything, you're most likely doing that because you're living in fear. So maybe it's time to sit down and reconsider what's going to be the best bang for your buck? To me, having the stuff in hand is better than paying into some insurance company that very likely will not come through when we need it to. And those of you, a lot of you I know that are listening to this anyway, you already understand all this, so to a lot of you it's a moot point, but maybe it might help you when you go to interact with other people that want to accuse you of being crazy or accuse you of living in fear. Hopefully this will give you a few ideas on ways that you can approach those people. All right, and by the way, any other thoughts, suggestions, ideas on ways to, and your own personal experiences, stories that you would like to share, and how being prepared and having things on hand, it helped you. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. Sometimes it's those little everyday things that hit people the most than the big, huge things because those are the kind of people that usually say, oh, it'll never happen to me, or it'll never happen here. Sometimes it's the smaller things, but share all those stories. For us who already know better, we still get encouraged by them. And for those who need to hear it so that they can start looking out for their own future, that will hopefully be the catalyst that gets them to start doing that. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.